I'm trying to get a scale of the crown in the context of other existing roads. So the crown is the continuous circle and the dotted one is the city limit. And if you look at the existing roads that we have, access roads, this is also an area that it has to still be finalized because the existing access roads right now are completely jammed. And Auroville, I think, deserves a better entrance. And actually, there is a potential. There are several explorations. But in principle, we have always looked at 4 possible entries that enter into 4 zones. I have marked the green belt schematically, but of course, the green belt cannot be all of this, the dotted line. It's just for us to know that Auroville will have a little bit of an influence. And there are the blues are the other settlements. And Auroville's Matri Mandir I've also marked as blue. These are the nodes of development that are all co-developing. And in that context, we have to manage the mobility amongst ourselves in the first place. In the context of the master plan, I want to explain a little bit that what is the purpose of the crown. The crown passes through and connects 4 different zones. All of you already know the residential zone is at the bottom, and the north is the industrial zone. And on the left and right, we have less dense international zone and the cultural zones. And the purple band, which goes through it, is not just a road, but it is an important connector of all the 4 zones. The crown is the generator of Auroville's first urban step. That's why the crown is so important to do now, because if you only develop this red area that I marked, if you have the line of Goodwill, you solve the problem of Auroville's entrance and the visitors to Matri Mandir and house 8,000 people. If you do residential zones, sector 1 and 2, where there's already a lot of infrastructure, you have 5,000 people there. And the city center, where it becomes much quieter and it has a different quality because there are no public transport. It's just like a park, like a very, very quiet kind of a Matri Mandir type environment spreading from the center. So that is 5,000. In total, we have only these 3 areas, 20,000 people. And we have a diversity of developments from very low rise in the crown inside the city center to the low rise urban fabric, the lowest ones of the residential zone and the highest one. So we will have solved all the swatches that we need to be able to experiment. And at the same time, with only one stretch of 800-meter road, we will have a complete infrastructure, compact, very economical, and at the same time, one crown road that allows 20,000 people, and the rest of Auroville can remain green, and the experiments made here can help to develop the rest of the city. The crown, in the context of the master plan, also has a certain urban fabric, which is interwoven to the urban fabric of the rest of the city. You will see that this urban fabric is also varying in each of the zones. According to the zone, there is more density, there is a different proportion of the built and the unbuilt areas, and so on. So there is a very interesting diversity of experiences in a very, very small connected loop. In other cities, this would be understood as a service road. But in the case of Auroville, it's way more than that. So that's what we need to understand, the role of the crown beyond the road. Also, it's important to understand the role of the crown in the context of a car-free city. So a pedestrian city is designed pedestrian-centric, and it's designed for walkability, first and foremost. And Helmut had sought his consultancy, and he had then given us a report which explained how many minutes it takes from the crown, 5 minutes to the center, 7 minutes to the outer ring road. And you can see all the radius here. It's a very, very small city. And in order for the mobility to remain walkable, we must have the density very, very much faithful to what Roger's office had calculated. If we achieve this kind of density and that many green spaces, we can achieve this walkable city. If we spread, we cannot. We have to solve a few open questions for which I keep chasing Srivatsa to give me a mobility consultant, since actually I'm since 2002 chasing everybody for it, because we really need to take very urgent decisions before we lay out the road of the crown in the detail. I'm not meaning to stall again. I have to say that we need more clarity on how certain outer developments will affect the crown, whether the switch of transport to alternative transport should happen at the edge of the city in the outer ring road, or Roger and Jacqueline, we have often discussed whether it should even happen at the green belt at different places, so that we even contain the traffic back before we enter the sanctuary like green belt, where actually food will be grown for the city and so on. So this is something to really important decision, so that the service nodes can be developed and the infrastructure switch can happen at the right spot. It's very interesting to note, I have been consulting over the years various very, very known mobility experts, such as Jan Gehl. He's somebody also Helmut admires, and I have worked with him and collaborated in other contexts. But it's interesting, actually, he gave me some feedback for the line of Goodwill. But he has, in his books, he recommends a walkable city to be 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. This is even, ours is even more efficient because of the circularity. So this is just for us to know how easy it is to do a car-free city. In the context of the car-free city, what we will also have to solve is the role of the radials. The radials are going to be, the right-of-ways are going to be the infrastructure distributors, but not every radial necessarily has to have vehicular traffic or public transport. This is a thing that, given the walkability, we have to get it cross-checked with a mobility expert. If the crown is here, the main decision to take is if the crown distributes outward, if the radials are fed through the crown, or should the Billinger's preference, the past, ATDCs and, people like Christo, we have been working since the perspective plan with Dattatri. We are not sure whether the outer ring road should be continuous, because it will allow people maybe to do thoroughfare. But at the same time, if we do it, it will allow us to stop the traffic outside and feed the radials, and not every radial should be with public transport, and only some. So this is an important open question. But inside the city, there will be many more streets which are walkable. There's a whole network. We have to link and understand those types of networks so that the crown can be designed properly. So what is the crown then, if it's not just a road? It is the key distributor and the main spine of the city. It is a lively street and public space, accommodating all the principal services according to the zone that it cuts through. Normal cities where the urban fabric is tight, where there are walkable streets and narrow, you see uniform fabric, you take any old city. But Roger tried to deliver a green city with this high density with 18-story, and he made a beautiful mix that is unforeseen, where the fabric is completely diverse, so all experiences are possible. So that's why if we would spread out, if we don't build the crown as a ring, what will happen is that we will not understand the city. Every place like Auroville now, there'll be all patchy things, because on one hand, we want green in our midst, but there'll be no urban fabric that ties everything together. So from that point of view, what Roger explained to us is that the crown, see, he has placed the crown in equidistant to the inner and outer. Only 650 meters on the out, and in the inner up to the banyan, it's 690. But actually, it's even shorter to walk. But you see, notice how instead of a congested city center, like a donut, the congestion is spread out, and everybody has to walk so little to reach anywhere. So this is a very, very interesting, very novel approach to cities and for future cities. And what the crown really means, there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. because people are not able to understand Auroville's unique mobility. They think that the crown is, some people think it's the inner street, some is the outer street. Well, the crown has three components. It has one, what I've marked orange, the crown road, where public transport will go through. But, and yes, alongside it, there are pavements for pedestrians. But the most important street, when Roger was calling up the crown, was the inner yellow street, which, because if you walk only like in old cities alongside the cars, you will be always interrupted, and you have to cross roads, and you have to have zebra crossings and all kinds of things, even if you have public transport and even if it's electrical. So the crown street is, if you have an inner street circulation sandwiched between the buildings, then you can have a freedom. And this is what has to be a meandering crown street. The road can be efficient for the infrastructure, geometric and circular, to take the shortest efficient route. But therefore, the street can meander, but be continuous and never disturbed and by the any other movement of traffic. The crown street can bridge on first floors, it can go over roads, and there's a whole life. It's not just a flyover where pedestrians have to climb and cross. The pedestrian will have facilities like the multimedia area has a cafe. It will have that quality. So you will not be going because you want to cross that car. It will be on your normal route, that whole orchestrated spaces. And therefore, the third element of the crown is in fact the crown buildings. So Roger always told us that the crown is three components: crown road, crown street, and crown buildings. It's a belt of buildings that will, the section that everybody was given in the Dreamweavers, but I feel we need to discuss much more about these three components so that the section is interpreted correctly. There is a right of way, of which only a narrow portion is claimed for the public transport. On either side, there is pedestrian ways, which there is a bicycle path, it will go fluidly. And then the crown will have perforations and allow the public space to enter inside the crown. And then that area is very freely designed with a common language, but with a lot of freedom, with all architects and different programs. And that side is very pleasant. The buildings do not have to face the public road as a facade. The real part you will face, if you do it continuous, will be Matrimandir. All the cafes upstairs, you'll be facing a whole garden city. So if Savitri Bhavan and Unity Pavilion would have linked up, and if Arca and all these, if we have the inner street, only then the inside garden will become attractive. When the city is developed, when the lake comes, everybody will want to face that side. So this section that you have will play out all in beautiful multiple expressions and very beautiful work by all the dream weavers. If these guidelines are also understood, a lot of those ideas and all the multiplicity of diverse expressions can all happen here, according to the programs that each zone needs and according to the architect's capacities to exploit such a wonderful kind of very minimum bylaw driven city. Roger's own guidelines explained us, I will not take too much time here, but I want to say that it exists, that the Crown Road, if you notice, he has marked red, always the street. The Crown Street is the predominant thing. And many people have interchanged the red, which if you see on the right sketch, it's the inner street. They have applied it to the main Crown Road, as if Kalpana on one side and Solar Kitchen on the other side is that main red road with sandwich of buildings, because that is the unconscious idea we carry from other cities. But this is what we need to understand, that the crown, while it is continuous on the left, Roger explains us, it must not be a barrier, because if we want the buildings to touch each other like Pondicherry to frame a street, but we want to make sure that it's not a barrier. It must be a very perforated, very porous kind of a belt, but connected and harmonious. And it should include the passing through radials and other cross transports, bicycle ways, etc., should penetrate the crown. In all his drawings, you will see that the principle of when he often in these blue buildings, you see he's not drawn the road because the street is what will make it pedestrian. But I think this sketch is applied by people as if it's the public transport. But by this, he means on this side, you look on the right, it is the meandering street full of facilities. We need to really in the ATDC also understand this so that we will allow the expression of all the architects to achieve this incredible possibility we have. And then especially in the line of force buildings, these radials also interconnect, and there are underneath these big buildings, there are pedestrian spaces that continue into the city fabric of movement. I do want to say that Auroville's mobility concept is unique. We are doing a city as a laboratory city to be a prototype that the rest of the world and Indian cities can emulate. And if we repeat what is already being done in other cities, then we would have no purpose. So what is unique in Auroville beyond all the green mobility that is happening in the world? It's very interesting. And Jan Gehl was also commenting that already 50 years ago, over 50 years ago, in 1965, Roger had already said that the automobile will be outdated. Even though it's outdated, it was, he said, although outdated and everybody knows it, still the automobile strives at its best to create hell inside the city and kill the outskirts. So they had discussed this in their first report with the mother, which we all know, and that the mother had encouraged that direction and even specified the slow speed of movement here, given the compactness of the town. So shall we allow the presence of cars? No. It is not only whether just because it's electric doesn't mean everyone will have an individual vehicle. There is two different things in green mobility. How individual can we go? And what kind of fuel? Both have to be seen for the city, not only the fact that it is a green mode of transport. I want to just explain this point extremely clearly to ATDC ourselves first, and then discuss it later. See, the post-industrial cities have, this is Gurgaon, cars dominate. And therefore, they cut the pedestrian life from one side of the road to the other side of the road, which is what we are trying to avoid. But this is what normally happens. Now, there are a whole lot of urban renewals taking place, what Patrick Geddes called conservative surgery, that in old cities that were pre-automobile, also the car came and ruined them. And then now we try to recuperate. These are some Indian cities, Madurai, Balrampur and Tanjore. We have been studying all these things. But what is very interesting is a lot of residents in Auroville are always giving the example of new European, retrofitted bicycles into the street, etc. But Auroville should not repeat this also, because even this is nothing but a retrofitting. This is Copenhagen, because cars are already there and now they are forced to put bicycle ways and streets completely disconnected from the urban fabric. These are this is in Bombay. So whenever they do green mobility in many of these cities, there is a rich pedestrian life in many of the European cities, but they are not altogether without the car's presence. So we have to be careful when we apply these models to shape us. First, we can see the possibility unique to Auroville, where we don't have to create these green walkways by reclaiming the road and make it a street. This is Barcelona. They have done as much as they could, but there are always the background of the car. And this is only so much you can do. This is Copenhagen again. So street furniture and everything, but these are reclaimed. But in Auroville, we should go beyond that. So in order to be a prototype for other new towns, which are so needed in India to solve India's urbanization, we have to talk about a radical rethinking of mobility as a holistic element of the city, rather than applying the formulae from other post-industrial contexts that are where bicycles and public space are being retrofitted. Very important. And then I want to explain in Roger's words Already this again, rehabilitation of street, he spoke about it, means claim the street as for the public life. This is something he talked about. Auroville will attempt rehabilitation of streets, a change from rush ways to a satisfying and happy system of circulation, from meeting place to meeting place, squares, fountains, gardens, pools, staircases, wings of shade, sudden shafts of sunlight. All of this suddenly becomes possible as a continuous thing, not only in courtyards of buildings. And here are some examples that could be good references for the Crown. This is Kada case. They have only one road, which is peripheral at the water. Everything else is pedestrian. Only they have one ring road. There's no other vehicles. And the buildings, sometimes they make arcades. This is the same one is from Kada case. Then we also studied Karlsruhe, Bologna, Venice. Studying all the urban fabric, what are there in cities that are very strong pedestrian quality. Old Delhi, Old Ahmedabad. You see the Old Delhi, Old Ahmedabad, the streets are so narrow in Old Ahmedabad. Even they are sometimes 2.5 meters wide. And they used to work for us. Hydra, Greece, Lamu. Lamu is a car-free city in Kenya. What does it enable? This inner street. We need to achieve intimacy for the residents, to encourage chance encounters. You will always find them when the car is not there. And if the street is intimate. A lot of people, we have had this discussion with Omar and a few others at various points. And what we are trying to explain, that if we accept that there is a parallel inner street, it can be much more narrow and intimate inside the Crown Street. But if we try to make the Crown Road to have intimacy, then we will interfere with public transport. We need public transport to enable pedestrian life. Some people cannot walk that many stretches. Plus, there are people who need ambulance, they need fire brigades, etc. These are so many cities. This is Jaisalmer on the left, Lugano on the right. You see, there is all over the world. The human scale is the same biology, the same psychology, the species needs the same things. It's the car which distorted it. In our climate, not only for rain, but also the harsh sun, these narrow streets are so needed. Otherwise, we will have to plant trees everywhere, and the roads will become wider. We need the shade and the rain protection for pedestrians to be beyond trees. Because if you make everything so wide, in India, land is a very limited resource. We cannot spend it like that. So Roger has put the green for Auroville in chunks, like parks, huge greens, and keeping the fabric compact. You see what kind of chance encounters inside the Ahmedabad pole. You see that, of course, this is residential. It can be also in the, if there's a cafe or there is a photocopy shop, people will bump into each other. They will sit in these edges. In Indian cities, you see that from time to time, these narrow streets burst into open plazas. And that's where larger markets or spontaneous activity can take place for gathering. In many cities, you'll find the same kind of quality. The radials could also have that type of quality, or it can go narrower. This is from Tunisia to Boston in the US. So the fabric has to be, these are Roger's drawings. Buildings have to touch each other. We don't have to keep spaces between, say, solar kitchen and potus, because this is all land. We are much more facilities can be housed, and the infrastructure can be reduced to less than 1/3 of the cost if the buildings would touch each other as Roger wanted it to do. Pedestrians will walk less. They can walk on first floors. There is a high degree of mixed use. And another thing, the Crown must include housing. It must. There is some prescribed amount of housing there so that these areas don't get deserted. These are such crowded ways, like this is Bombay, but these arcades, which are alongside the Crown Road, can also have some kind of informality in it. Now, of course, these are very crowded because Bombay did not continue these arcades. There are very few, so they are packed. But if you have it throughout the city, you see our architectural examples. are very, very suited to that. If you see Fatehpur Sikri, these are the references that have been there for Auroville. You will all notice also the road, the Matri Mandir tiles with the stone, Delhi Agra, red earth of Auroville, Fatehpur Sikri. You see all these details exist in our vocabulary. The arcades. This will be an arcade example, narrow or fat, broad, according to if there is here a bus stop on the side of the crown. This is, you don't need a separate bus stop. You just put a bench here in the arcade. This is Bologna, and I can imagine this is a bus stop where people are sitting and chatting. All the students are usually sitting on these, there are seats in Bologna. What is very interesting, the buildings have a guideline that they have to touch each other, and every building budget has to provide the arcade or the upper connections. It is not paid by the city. The building has to, if it is on that road, they have to continue the arcade. And Auroville should also have this type of guidelines. So concluding, Auroville's unique mobility, to be a prototype for new towns, we have to exploit the unique features of Auroville, that we have what nobody has. No individual ownership of land. Auroville is free of plots and individualism. So we can have many more bridges and continuities. This provides the great opportunity to build those continuities and pedestrian networks across buildings. If we manage this, all the other towns can really emulate us. And that's why Auroville was seen as a pilot project to help all the urbanization in India and the rest of the world for the future. Because I knew about all these principles, I did in all my work in Auroville, wherever I could, I tested how these bridges are going to be. That's how a small housing project becomes urban in isolation, because these different buildings are just on, not only on ground floor, they are connected on upper floor. That's how residents can communicate. You have narrow streets, big streets, ramps, bridges, staircases. They create life. 3 buildings would have been just separate buildings. But for the town hall complex, we tested this kind of broad pathway, narrow pathway, bridge, staircase bridge, all kinds of things. So all these things, this is on the first floor. On the second floor, you can connect things on all these floors. This is what belongs to the fabric of Auroville. I mean, this is a way to exploit the beautiful context of non-ownership of land, or to say it's all under the single ownership. Nowhere we can try these models. You see them in Roger's sketches. Always there's continuity of different things. Not just roads and streets, of waterways, of, there are many, he exploited levels so that no, everywhere you have a zebra crossing or a first floor circulation or a staircase. In Roger's vision, no network must have dominance over the other. All can flow. There is no need of a zebra crossing even. You might have to have it in some points, but you don't rely on it. You rely on levels for continuity. So the waterways should be connected. The overflows should be connected. The road should be uninterrupted of the infrastructure uninterrupted of pedestrians, and the pedestrians uninterrupted. The bicycles uninterrupted by both. This is what we are trying to achieve in Auroville. You see this kind of work that Roger has explored. And now I want to just tell you, for Auroville's green network, we must not think of the crown without realizing other networks. Auroville, from the outer ring road, we have got a consecutive circles of reduced impact. The red one is the crown. Already in 2002, we had done 2007, this city center brochure, I'm using it to explain. Then beyond it, there is not only is there a street inside the crown buildings, there is another loop for bicycles and people who want to walk inside the connected green infra network. And there is a blue network along the lake. There are going to be ways along the lake. So for Auroville, we want to propose 4 networks in the mobility. A red network, which is public transport. In the public transport, we have 2 separate shuttles. which don't mix with the other transport. One is to bring the visitor center to Matri Mandir, just go back and forth. Then Siru, all the big traffic will come. And then there is a shuttle. We want a more children's toy train, which only children also can drive and use in the school area. When the parents leave them there is a common place. And we have planned this. You can look at the city center. There is a cute shuttle for a small toy train for children in the park. They can enjoy that zone is only for their scale, the whole cultural zone. Children are in the heart of the city next to the Matri Mandir. They should grow up. Then there is a yellow network. The pedestrians can go freely through the city through the yellow ways. And the yellow ways are not, there are many pedestrian ways, but the yellow ways are lively ones. There are other meditative ways. The yellow one is where the market is, the groceries, the functions, the daily services. And this is why a compact. So if you walk on the yellow route, you know what you will expect there. You'll bump into people. If you walk quietly, you can walk in the green network. And this green network will also have bicycles. Now, if you are a bicycler who never wants to see a car, you will use only the green network, because each and every building can be served by each and every network. We have achieved it, and there it is possible to do in this spiral galaxy plan. It is not for nothing that we have this shape. It is for enabling this type of thing. There is a blue network of very quiet walkways which will connect the lake promenade. People who are just going for very quiet spots where, maybe there will be some kind of bird, butterfly life, etc., that it will pass through other areas where probably Darkali, it should pass. There is already passing there. And, areas where waters will be caught for the city and feed the lake. So there are 4 networks, and sometimes the beautiful intersections, blue meets green, green meets yellow, red meets green. What happens in these intersections? We will unfold that as we go along in our further work with the team. And it's very important to know that the bus that we're talking about, it is to be a very small 12, 20 seater, very small, not making a big impact, but being more frequent and just small, not dominating. Smaller groups going around, not making a big impact. That's what is desired. So I will skip this part, but I'll tell you there is a 2007 study where much more detail is there about the inside of the city of this kind of networks. I don't want to make the presentation long, but I want to say that once you cross the inside of the crown, the type of circulation, you see the toy train that is there for the children, that is the inside. This is like a park, skaters can go there. Then there will be some service timings when the baguettes have to be brought to deliver to the cafe, etc. There will be timings for those kind of vehicles when the children are not going to school, when it doesn't disturb anyone, they can come and go. How does the crown now play out? I'll just show you other works we have done. This is a residential zone. You will see there's a red network, a yellow network, pedestrians, bicycles, and green connections. And you can see that how this is merging into the rest of the urban fabric. It's a work in progress, so it's all not complete. Near the solar kitchen, we have to integrate it because it is breaking the continuity of the path. So we are proposing that the fabric should, another building should come behind it, and the yellow should continue and interlink them. And hereafter, the buildings should touch each other. It can interrupt sometimes. It's not a problem. It's okay as an exception, not as the norm. This is how it will look. The green patches, the park will penetrate in the porosity. The park will be coming into these buildings, and the yellows will also come into the building spaces, like this. The sections will vary. Jacqueline always tells me the misunderstanding is there because we have not been drawing in some of our old projects, the other side of the crown. The buildings like Kalpana exist also on the other side of the crown, but they are not the crown buildings. What we call crown building is the sandwich of the inside of the crown. The Kalpana and all that, they belong to the residential zone. They have a different program. They are housing or they are industries. They have different program. The crown buildings are the inner side sandwich. Very important to not call the outer one the crown building. This is the kind of sketches I'm going to get done for us. Architect friend of ours in the team, Hemant Lele. He's an accomplished watercolor artist from my own school. So we are drawing, this is for the inside of the crown. In places, it could be narrow also. But the thing we have to do is next to the solar kitchen, I would like to tell ATDC, please, I'm concerned that the road, the Perambuk part, which has been paved, actually that should not be paved and it's not for vehicles. The point, it should deviate over there. The crown should, the vehicles should not, I mean, it should not be paved with the same language as the inner street. It creates a lot of confusion and it attracts and invites the traffic inside towards Matri Mandir, which we don't want to do. We have to take that loop and shift it in the right place. And the road can be low impact street. Like it has to go through, bicycles can go and so on, but it should not be, the crown should be realized in its right place. So, and then the crown on the other side goes through the big line of Goodwill. You will see that even though the line of Goodwill is 18-story building on the outer end, and a ground, it comes down to 2-3 stories inside Matri Mandir, but the urban fabric is completely merging. For a pedestrian, it is very, very comfortable. There is no tower sitting on your head. You will see that in the next month when I will present this project. But we have to understand the crown's diverse quality and challenges is that there are places where it has to meet high density. The most important point for the crown intersection is when the visitors center receives the new visitor center, hopefully, or any other new development where we can have in the 18-story building, where we will have the line of Goodwill, where the hotels and the tourism and the, let's call it visitors, have to be well received. There is a Oro Dam water catchment. They can be contained on the outer part of it, but there is a continuous exhibition space in the ground floor like this for visitors to have a beautiful shaded walk, and they go to the Matri Mandir and be received very well, and at the same time do not have a negative impact on the daily life of the residents if we build this intersection. So I'm very keen that this should develop along with the crown. In the line of Goodwill, you will see there are green ways also crossing through it. There are blue ways, all of that. And there are sometimes upper level connections like the High Line in New York. You know, the buildings will have bridges. The crown in that area will help to connect on other levels. Very interesting things are possible there. In the industrial zone, similarly, we have taller buildings. And that's where Darkali is. See the water catchment I have drawn over there, the water channels. I will talk about the water in a moment, but I just want to explain that the industrial zone, we have to be very careful. I'm concerned it will need high rise and high rise will allow bigger budgets for high tech infrastructure. And this kind of projects can actually pay for what is required to do water management, which I will just now come to. The industrial zone also has these 4 networks and they connect with a very important, the youth require this. We have not started even, this is a vocational training belt on the inside of the industries, because the industries are to the outside. They become like offices as they enter, but there's a lot of skill training happening here. Again, with the cultural zone, the children can and the young people can develop their knowledge and skills here, and they can be tied very closely to the economic activities and offices so that they can gradually transition into other works in this zone. Here again, there are all the 4 networks and pathways. You know, even though there are towers, they are not disconnected from the urban fabric on the ground floor. They have all that kind of quality. So the pedestrian has a very smooth life of continuity in all these areas. And now we will come to the water catchment. And yes, currently, this is not all water, but this is the depression. This kind of thing have been created due to soil erosion. And we will talk about that now as the end part of my presentation. But just to explain, this part of the urban fabric is we have to accept it's like a really serious infrastructure demand, because we need lots of office spaces here. And Roger had given us a guideline how the crown and the fabric of the high-rise do not, they are all one. And there are separate reports I have, just to let you know, there are all calculations here for those who will do DDPs, that there are very detailed calculations of the figures, the square meters and whatnot. It is all very important to know before just designing the crown in a very kind of emotional or nostalgic way. While we solve those requirements, we have to not forget what huge amounts of square meters we have to deliver for Auroville's economy to be self-sustaining. So now the water. Already, even about the water, Roger had already right in the beginning, in his report to the mother, had mentioned that the greatest difficulty is water, because, see, on one hand, there is a shortage of water. We all know in Tamil Nadu about the salt water intrusion, how important it is. There is no water to actually sustain a town if we don't look at it in a new way. So he had really pointed this out. And he had also said that given the climate, see, we have alongside all the wind and sun context, we have a monsoon. So he also said the capital problem of drainage prevents from formulating any substantial option. So he had highlighted there are two problems. One is that we don't have enough water. Then there is the problem that because we allow the water to run off into the sea, there is, like in many problems, there is it becomes a drainage problem if people don't do something with the water as an integral part of the city. So now in Darkali, in our local area, we have Irumbai pond catchment and we have Kuilapalem, and we will have, for Auroville, we will have the lake. Every Tamil settlement, please read the book Dying Wisdom. It's especially about the Tamil wisdom on water management, and by the way, on non-ownership. That's why there is this Perambuk and so many type of Perambuk. We are in the right place where there is a deep knowledge about non-ownership, about continuity of land through non-ownership, and about water. And all the bunding success of Auroville, Raman was telling me, it comes from the bunding wisdom of retaining water on the spot from the local area. Now, if we were to assume that Auroville is not a city, then people can go on digging and catching as much water wherever they want, and that's good. But if we are going to build a city, and if we really believe that is a real serious thing, then we won't be just digging randomly. We won't widen catchments randomly. We will work on the full plan to make the lake happen. And the whole city, you look at Roger's plan, please, once again. The whole city is a network of water catchment. Even if the water will be caught, like the Harald Kraft proposal at one point, because Auroville is on a mount, all the water will flow downhill. Each Auroville gated community does not have to make its own water solution. There has to be a whole global water solution, just like Irumbai did, just like Kuilapalem did, so will Auroville do. But we will do it integrating in the urban fabric. They were also integrated. Just look at all the temple tanks. So we are going to do that in our city. And all the water which drains off in the sea, I mean, even if we catch it, there will be overflows in the monsoon. If we don't do it, we will be flooded like Chennai and Bombay. So the overflow must also be visible. They should pass under buildings, etc. For those moments, these are all Roger's sketches. Everywhere is water, 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 water. You see? So don't see the water rain as a problem. And this opportunity of Darkali is a great opportunity to do a research and make a little prototype what we are going to do. With not this, we have to make so many more catchments. Roger designed for how buildings should, how crowns should pass through, allow wherever required the environment with very few pillars of intervention. And if you notice Roger's work now in detail, have you noticed how prominent is his water pipes from the roof? And look at the whole form of everything. Everywhere they are catching water. There's one picture of Roger. See, everywhere water is supposed to be caught. We need it and integrated into the thinking, not as a problem. Everywhere water spouts So much so that the whole beautiful La School building is nothing but an umbrella, many umbrellas tied together. The beams are designed according to catching water. It is a deep, important thing to understand about the galaxy plan, that we want to value the water we have. And therefore, we can think about all other cities where they bridge over water, where pedestrian ways continue. You know, this is a very good example what could happen in a place like Darkali, where in some seasons it could be dry and people can move there through it. The rabbits can cross and the monitor lizards. You know, we are talking continuity on many levels, right? This is how a crown could be, the dry season and the wet season with water. There are cities where this kind of surface flows, when they are, instead of draining, they are integrated into the walkways. Very beautiful examples we have collected. But look at our heritage, Mandu, temple tank, pedestrian way. Please, everyone who can visit the city, you see the bridges also there from different levels. And there the water percolates down to the detail. Look at our step 12s. India always included infrastructure, not looking like an infrastructure pipe. India's approach to water infrastructure was to celebrate it. It is a most celebrated architecture in India, the step 12s. How people go every day to fetch water. It's a celebration. It's not just an infrastructure pipe or a flyover. So this is our heritage, and absolutely it should be there in Auroville. But in modern cities, you can look at various places where water catchments and pedestrian life. There are so many examples. When we will have time, I will send you. So why not? It can be done deviating is an easy way. We are postponing the problem, apart from making the infrastructure problem complicated for the city. Sooner or later, we have to make real prototypes of how are we going to start building the language of these bridge elements. Look, in many cities, all these good cities, they have enabled, this is High Line, they've enabled bridges. In Copenhagen, there's water there, there is a bicycle path, there is a second level pedestrian way. In Venice, this could be the line of Goodwill, where the Oro Dam area, there could be bridges that allow. All types of continuities are enabled through the fact, all sorts of continuity. Always use the levels for Auroville. And I want to again remind us that Auroville's mobility is a holistic proposal. Every mode intersects with another mode, but nobody disturbs each other. And many, many cities are doing it now. Even where they have land ownership, they are doing it. In Minnesota, they have on first floor level, all the walkways are continuous. They have to, because then it's warm for them to go shopping. So anyway, I'm now coming to the end. I'm going to skip this because maybe it is too long, but we have all the guidelines here. According to the URDPFI guidelines of Ministry of Urban Development, we fall under this category based on our speed, and we follow under, it's explained what kind of mixed traffic we fall under and what kind of hierarchy of urban development community. We come under community because we are under 100,000. And then we have got detailed guidelines and program. I will skip this now because it's too long, but this exists. I will skip this just to show you that all this there's the guideline. I want to say one last point before I end. This is something very, very important. To be serious about a street, we have to not only talk about the right of way, we have to actually design the language so that even if the buildings are different, every city has a vocabulary. This is Berlin. All walkways have this diagonal pattern, and cobblestones are for people to do random things. Like you can park your bicycle. You can tie a dog on one post. You can have street furniture, and cafes can spill over. People can claim, but nobody can, they cannot block those other patterns. So we need this language for Auroville. This is my very, very good example is Lisbon. And actually in Goa, we have the similar Portuguese kind of in Fontanias, but the drainage, the patterns, Lisbon has decided that white cobblestone, whitish, is important. So everybody knows that pedestrian is prioritized, but patterns are allowed, drainage is incorporated. Once you know the vocabulary, anyone doing a project in anywhere else in this Auroville, they will use that material palette, and then you get a cohesiveness, because the public have to know that all of this is our common space and they can claim it. Okay, so drainage has to be included. There should be 2-3 patterns, then it's very easy. In my next month's presentation to you on the line of Goodwill, I will explain how the line of Goodwill's mass, the red mass, which is 3 or 4 stories, follows the Matri Mandirs, extends into when you enter, the visitors get a sense of the same language as Matri Mandir, which is the red stone. Roger has already defined in Matri Mandir, you can see it very well, that there is a vocabulary, that the red earth of Auroville is shown through red paving. I would propose that we do our streets. I would love that to be given one little patch that we can actually build this and show the people. I would love to be given one spot where we execute this pattern. How are our benches? How is, we have all got, we know that there is white granite, black granite, and the red is not very local, but we can use it because it reminds us of the red earth of Auroville of the pioneering days. So I think it's a very good thing for Auroville. And then we can allow, and I would like to end with this image, that you see in many cities, they have a definition and then the people can do what they want. That means locally, the architect or whoever wants to do can also express themselves. This is Lisbon. Everywhere you go, there is expression. And I want to end with this slide. In Tamil Nadu, we revere the floor. As we all know about what we do with the kolam, that, every morning, this ritual has been maintained over generations. And if we have the set vocabulary of the Matri Mandir, I would imagine that we should define this and allow in some places to have patterns also to signify something. Where is an important node? Something like solar kitchen. There can be some theme. Some people express themselves on the paving. In Lisbon, they've done so much of that. And yet, wherever you go, you're in Lisbon, and every pedestrian knows how to behave. Every child knows, if I see this pattern unconsciously, I can go there with my bicycle. If I have this pattern, I do that. So I would like that we really build a patch. We have done so many patches of the Crown Road. Please let us do one patch of the Crown Street. And I would really hope you will let my team make one little experiment there. It could even be put loose if you don't want to put it fixed. But I would love to establish this kind of unique characteristic of Auroville, which is contemporary and futuristic, but totally built upon our ancient civilization's wisdom. Thank you. Thanks to the team. And thank you all for listening.